Besides, how do I start my own garden? The question that I get asked the most often is, what the heck am I supposed to do with all this garden produce? And to that end, I've put together my favorite quick, easy dinner recipes using as much of your garden produce as possible. Here's a 20-minute simple pasta recipe. Let's do this.
This video is brought to you by Ariat.
The key to actually being able to start to finish do these dinners in 20 minutes is to really think about what's going to take the longest and plan things out accordingly. So the first thing we're gonna need to do is boil our water for our pasta. I've started that pot on the boil, and while this is quite controversial, I like to salt my pasta water because then that salt really cooks into the pasta and gives it extra flavor. I'll give that a quick stir. If you're worried about your pots boiling over, put a wood spoon on top. Some sciencey thing happens with the bubble and it doesn't go over. So once I put the pasta in there, I'm gonna turn it back down to medium-high. Because we're not using a meat protein in this, I'm gonna use some butter to get some good animal fats in there. But butter has a pretty low burn temperature, so I'm gonna add some olive oil to it so that they can kind of combine and sciencey things happen so that the butter doesn't burn. We're gonna let that heat up, and while we do, we are going to get our aromatics ready to put in that pan. And actually, I'm gonna cut the onions first. First of all, this onion has seen some better days, but you know what? Oh my God. No. Oh my God. There was only a very small salvageable part of this onion, and actually one of the best things about learning to cook at home on the fly with whatever you've got is figuring out what can make really easy substitutions. So what's similar to an onion that we do have? Let's get some scallions. So with these scallions, we're gonna think about what's the hardest, like the physically hardest thing that we wanna put in the pot first, because that's gonna be what needs to cook the longest. So we're gonna put all of the hard parts of the scallion in the pot now to reduce with the tiny little bit of onion that we had. And we want actually to turn this down a little bit. We don't want it getting too hot. We want to cook it low and slow so that nothing burns. But once those onions start to turn translucent, we know we're in business. Next thing that needs to go in the pan right away is our garlic. I like to use a healthy amount of garlic in my cooking. Peeling garlic by hand is a total drag, and crushing it helps remove the peeling super easily, as well as gets your chopping off to a good start. So there we go, we've got all that. And you could toss them in as whole chunks there, or you can chop them up a little bit. I've got some basil and some thyme. We're gonna toss this in here because these have a little bit woodier stems. They'll cook down a little bit slower, so we're gonna put them in now. Those will start jamming in there. Next thing is to put some tomatoes in this. You don't even have to make this part of the pasta from scratch if you don't want to. You can just get a can of tomatoes. Just make sure that the only ingredient in there is tomatoes, and toss a can of tomatoes into these aromatics, let it cook down a little bit, and you'll be right as rain as well. Also, I'm sure I'll get some comments about these tomatoes not being ripe. It's the variety, they're quite ripe. True sauce, especially if it's been canned, gets rid of the peelings, but nobody got time for that in a 20-minute dinner. With this, I'm just cutting it into manageable chunks so that it can cook down. I want all the chunks to be similar size, but I'm not super worried about it because it's all gonna be delicious once it cooks down. All right, now we're gonna add our tomatoes in, and we're going to put those in, stir them down, let those start cooking down, and we're very quickly gonna switch gears and grab our pasta. We want our pasta to be not quite done. So if you were to take a piece of it, it's very hot, so I'm not gonna do that right now. Oh, also another pro tip here. I'm gonna actually use the lid of the pot to strain the pasta because I don't wanna make another dish dirty as part of our 20-minute routine here. And the little bit of pasta water that's left in there is actually going to help kind of add a little bit of starch to our sauce. So I'm gonna actually take this, hot. Just make sure. Yeah, so if you look really closely, hot. Inside the pasta, there's still a little bit of a line, a starchy line. and that lets you know that it's about 1 minute from being done, and that's exactly what we want. We put some salt in there, almost more than you'd think you need, because I mean, tomatoes are a fruit. They're naturally very, very sweet, so we want the salt to kind of balance that out. We'll let that cook down for a minute. I'm gonna grind up some pepper to toss in there. Got a little overzealous when I filled this thing. I'm gonna use some of these bigger flakes from the middle there. Just drop them down in there. That'll add some flavor to this sauce. They'll break down a little bit as everything cooks. Speaking of pepper, I like a little heat in my spaghetti sauce, but I forgot to put this in earlier, so I'm actually going to chop it up into really small pieces so that it's not, oh my eyes. Incidentally, if you let this cook a little bit longer, this is actually also my pizza sauce. You just need to let it reduce down for a whole lot longer so it's not so soupy. But for what we're making right now, this is gonna be great. Got our basil somewhere at the bottom of this pile. We're gonna chop this up. We're gonna toss these scallions in just at the last little bit. Let them cook down. I should have mentioned at the beginning of this why I chose this specific pan. I wanted enough room that once this cooks down, I'm able to add the noodles to the pan so that the flavor of the sauce really gets cooked inside the noodles, and that's what does that last minute of cooking. I'm gonna take a few of these little baby tomatoes and cut these in half. Well, I totally forgot to put the squash in, but this is one great thing about this sauce. You can put anything that you happen to have in it. Any kale that you happen to have, or chard, or other vegetables. Okra, love okra. Put that right in there, it cooks down with everything else, and then you've got a little bit heartier, little healthier meal. But who cares about that anyway? We're gonna cover this pasta with some cheese, so let's go. So if you're intent on eating after 20 minutes, which I usually am, then this is pretty much ready to go. We're gonna add the pasta in, but the good news is, if you wanna just take a little break, this sauce only gets better the longer it cooks. So if you wanna take it and spend 3 or 4 hours on it, you just turn that heat all the way low and just come back and give it a stir every once in a while. It'll get nice and thick and delightful. It's so good. Anyway, we're gonna add some pasta to this now, though. We're gonna use a little bit of that pasta water to just add some starchiness to the sauce. The pasta will get its last little bit of cooking in, and then we just are gonna stir this in here. See that nice thickness there? Whew, I love it, I love it, I love it. Remember, we salted the pasta, so it is also bringing its own elements of salt to this dish. We'll fully stir this up. We'll add our little cherry tomatoes. Here's your chance to pretty affordably look like a real pro in the kitchen. This was actually a woodworking project turn kitchen item. It's called a microplane. I have links for them below, but you can check this out. It's a awesome little grater. It's a great way to get your Parmesan in. It also is easier to clean than a cheese grater, which is why I like it, let's be honest. But we've got some Parmesan cheese here, and remember, we've got that homemade ricotta cheese from my cow that we're going to serve this over, so we don't need to go too crazy, but I mean, can you go too crazy with Parmesan? I think not. We'll stir that in and then we'll do a little topping. It's starting to thicken up a little bit. That cheesy goodness is coming in, all of that sauce is cooking into the pasta. We'll get a bowl, we'll spoon a nice, healthy helping into it. Get some ground up pepper. Got some fresh basil. We've got these cherry tomatoes to put on there. Parmesan, scoop of ricotta with a tomato. Well, again, the plating is not really my strong point. The eating is the strong point. Get some flake salt on there. Another thing that I really like to do with these things is to take some heavy cream from my cow and just give it a little drizzle on top. Boop. It's so good. Also, thank you, Sweet Reba, for all of this delicious heavy cream ricotta. If only you could taste it through the screen. 20 minutes, delish, we're good to go. If you've seen any of my other videos where I am woodworking or blacksmithing or working around the farm or working on my antique truck, you may be a little bit surprised to see me in a dress. But truth be told, I love wearing dresses, and when I'm not working outside, I'm in a dress. So today, because I knew I would be cooking all day, I put on one of my favorites. This dress is from Ariat, and when Ariat contacted me to ask me if they could be a long-term sponsor of my channel, I couldn't have been more pleased because I've been wearing Ariat clothes and boots for the last 10 years. In fact, I wore my favorite Ariat boots on my wedding day as I walked down the aisle. One other thing about my boots that is especially great here in Tennessee is their moisture wicking technology, which will keep my feet dry and smelling like roses. Ariat products are built for style and for comfort. They'll withstand the rigors of the farm, but you can also wear them all day and still feel great. All my favorite Ariat products are linked below, and if you click that link, you'll get 10% off your first order. If you like this video, I have a ton more cooking and homesteading projects that you can find in a playlist linked below. Make sure you're subscribed with the notifications on. I post a new video every week. I will see you in the next video. Cheers!